Peru is once again in political turmoil. The capital, Lima, is gripped by anxiety as the nation watches its leaders struggle to maintain control. The air is thick with uncertainty, and the streets are alive with speculation and concern about what will come next. On October 10, 2025, Congress overwhelmingly voted to impeach President Dina Boluarte, ending months of mounting public anger and government paralysis. The decision came after weeks of heated debate, with lawmakers facing intense pressure from both the public and the media. The impeachment marked a dramatic turning point as the country's political crisis reached its boiling point. The charge, moral incapacity, has become a now familiar tool in Peru's volatile politics, used repeatedly to remove presidents in recent years. Critics argue that this vague accusation allows Congress to act swiftly, but it also deepens the sense of instability and unpredictability that has plagued the nation's leadership. With 118 out of 122 lawmakers in favor, Boluarte's support collapsed almost overnight. The overwhelming margin left little doubt about the depth of her isolation, as even former allies turned their backs in a desperate bid to distance themselves from a sinking administration. She refused to appear before Congress, a move seen by many as a surrender. Her absence was interpreted as an admission of defeat, and it sent shockwaves through the political establishment, leaving her supporters confused and her critics emboldened. Her absence left allies powerless and opponents emboldened. The halls of Congress echoed with celebration from the opposition, while her supporters struggled to process the rapid collapse of their leader's authority. The catalyst, a relentless crime wave that shattered public trust and exposed the government's inability to protect its citizens. Rising violence and insecurity had become daily realities, fueling outrage and protests across the country. For many Peruvians, the government's failure to address these issues was the final straw. Congress, once her shield, became her executioner, highlighting the fragility of alliances in Peruvian politics. Political loyalties shifted rapidly, and the same lawmakers who once defended Boluarte now led the charge to remove her, underscoring the unpredictable nature of power in Peru. Now, the nation faces an uncertain future, with instability looming and citizens desperate for security. As Peruvians gather in their homes and on the streets, they wonder who will lead them next, and whether anyone can restore the trust and stability that has been lost. The fall of a president has left a deep scar, and the path forward remains unclear. Dina Boluarte assumed the presidency of Peru in December 2022, not through a popular vote, but as the constitutional successor. Her rise to power was sudden and unexpected, thrusting her into the highest office at a moment of national crisis and uncertainty. This transition followed the dramatic downfall of Pedro Castillo, who was arrested after his failed attempt to dissolve Congress and seize control of the government. The country was left reeling, and Boluarte stepped in as the only legal option to fill the power vacuum. From her very first day in office, Boluarte was met with fierce resistance. Castillo's supporters saw her as a usurper, accusing her of betraying the leftist movement and the will of the people. Massive protests erupted across Peru, with demonstrators flooding the streets, clashing violently with police and demanding her resignation. The unrest quickly escalated, leading to deadly confrontations and a mounting death toll. Boluarte's approval ratings plummeted as the country became increasingly polarized. The deep divisions in Peruvian society were laid bare, and her government struggled to restore order or win public trust. To survive politically, Boluarte forged a tenuous alliance with the conservative-dominated Congress. This partnership was never based on shared vision, but rather on mutual convenience. Impeachment threats loomed constantly, and her grip on power depended on fragile deals and shifting loyalties. As crime rates soared and public safety deteriorated, the mood in the country darkened further. The conservative bloc that had shielded her from removal began to see her as a political liability, especially as public outrage over crime and insecurity reached a boiling point. Without a political party of her own or a popular mandate, Boluarte found herself increasingly isolated. She lacked a loyal base of support, making her vulnerable to both political attacks and shifting alliances within Congress. In the end, as the crime wave intensified and her last political allies abandoned her, Boluarte's presidency unraveled. Her time in office became a cautionary tale of how fragile power can be when it rests on shaky foundations and lacks the support of the people. Fear was the invisible force that swept across Peru, shaping every conversation, every decision, and ultimately driving President Boluarte's downfall. The sense of unease was palpable, lingering in the air like a heavy fog. People hurried through the streets, glancing over their shoulders, wary of what might be lurking in the shadows. A relentless surge in violent crime and extortion dominated daily life, overshadowing the economy, politics, and even the pandemic's lingering effects. It was as if the entire nation was holding its breath, waiting for the next headline, the next tragedy. By the middle of 2025, the numbers were staggering. Over 6,000 homicides and nearly 16,000 reported cases of extortion. These were not just statistics. They represented shattered families, lost livelihoods, and a society pushed to its breaking point. The violence reached into every neighborhood, rich and poor alike. Businesses shuttered their doors, unable to cope with threats and uncertainty. Families barricaded themselves at home, living in constant dread. The government's response was widely seen as slow, confused, and ultimately inept, fueling even more frustration and despair. President Boluarte pointed fingers at illegal immigration, hoping to shift the blame. But for most Peruvians, these explanations rang hollow. They wanted real solutions, not more excuses or empty promises. The sense of abandonment was overwhelming. Citizens felt the state had failed its most basic duty, to keep them safe. Many wondered if anyone in power truly understood their fear, or cared enough to act. This deep insecurity became a rallying cry, uniting people from all walks of life. Across cities and towns, voices rose in protest, demanding change and accountability. What began as fear soon transformed into a powerful political movement. The public's anxiety and anger coalesced, demanding Boluarte's removal and a new path forward for Peru. The breaking point came on October 8, 2025, when gunfire erupted at an Agua Marina concert in Lima, injuring 5 and shocking the nation. The attack, in a space meant for joy, symbolized the government's failure to ensure safety anywhere. Images of panicked concert-goers dominated the news, fueling outrage. The public's anger became uncontainable, with calls for Boluarte's resignation echoing nationwide. Congress seized the moment, using the concert shooting as proof of her incapacity. Lawmakers who once hesitated now joined the push for impeachment. Within 48 hours, the political tide swept Boluarte from office. Boluarte's fate was sealed by her own allies in Congress, who had shielded her for nearly 2 years. As crime soared, conservatives, champions of law and order, could no longer justify supporting her. The Agua Marina shooting was the final straw, making continued support politically toxic. On October 9th, Congress admitted 4 impeachment motions, a sign her coalition had fractured. Opposition and disillusioned conservatives united, forming a supermajority for removal. This was not about principle, but political survival. The alliance of convenience dissolved, replaced by consensus for her ouster. The final impeachment vote on October 10th was a political spectacle with a foregone conclusion. Lawmakers from all sides condemned Boluarte's failure to stop the crime wave. Boluarte's absence from the hearing signaled defeat, making it easier for Congress to act. The result: 118 out of 122 lawmakers voted for removal, far surpassing the threshold. The scale of the vote showed her total loss of support. In a rare moment of unity, Congress ended her presidency, plunging Peru into another uncertain transition. Boluarte's tumultuous rule was over in a single decisive night. Boluarte's impeachment is just the latest in Peru's relentless cycle of political chaos. Since 2016, the country has cycled through 7 presidents, each toppled by scandal or impeachment. The moral incapacity clause, once for medical emergencies, is now a political weapon. Presidents rarely command a majority, making every administration vulnerable to Congress's whims. This power struggle has paralyzed governance and deepened public cynicism. Boluarte's fall fits the pattern. A weak president abandoned by Congress, swiftly removed. Without systemic reform, Peru's destructive cycle is likely to continue. In the final hours, Boluarte's government made a feeble attempt to defend itself. Prime Minister Eduardo Arana addressed Congress, outlining anti-crime measures, but lawmakers were unmoved. Arana's admission, "Our first day could be our last," betrayed resignation, not resolve. Boluarte's attempts to blame illegal immigration backfired, seen as scapegoating rather than leadership. The public and Congress had lost all trust. The administration's words rang hollow. With no credibility or support left, the government's last stand collapsed. The outcome was inevitable. Boluarte's presidency ended in defeat. Boluarte's removal thrusts Peru into another uncertain transition. The head of Congress now becomes interim president, tasked with restoring calm and calling new elections. But the political landscape is fractured, with no clear leader or party to unite the country. The next election campaign will be chaotic, likely producing another weak president and divided Congress. Public security remains the top concern. Any new leader will be judged on their ability to curb crime. Without real political reform, the cycle of instability will persist. Peru waits, hoping this crisis sparks lasting change, but fearing more of the same.